Did you contact her?
Okay. No,
So let me
no.
just see whether we can work it out. So Jen had a solution. Let me just tell you where it is. So which specific, is it the one that now tells you you can't use a personal account?
No,
Is it the one that
yes.
says you can't use a personal account, you have to use an organizational email?
No, that's for the second lab. The
And have you
first
seen
lab
the
is
solution for that?
for the second one, for the second lab.
For the first one? Yeah, that one for the
No,
organizational account, you've seen the solution for it, right?
yes, but it requires an organizational email, and I'm sure most of them don't have it.
She says there's a solution.
For the first lab, RBAC.
Okay, let's do this, because you hadn't also finished the same, right?
Yes.
So let's do this. Let's all try and finish between now and the next session. We can try to organize a makeup support session for that one, because there's something I need to finish today, so that then we're not carrying forward the topic for today. Now, for the support session, I believe Jen actually worked on some turnaround, some workaround, sorry, for those two particular issues for Lab 1 and Lab 2. So we'll pick them up from there. For now, but at least you've captured all the issues they might be having, so that we try and address them on that particular session. Now, I mentioned that I am working to get an environment set up, like a pre-built environment for the labs, because I noticed some of the labs actually assume such a pre-built environment. So I've been trying to do that with the Microsoft people using our academy. You know, USIU is a Microsoft Academy. So I actually raised a support session on the Microsoft educators community. So I'm being assisted on that. So I'm hoping that between now and our next session, I'll be able to have provided that kind of platform. But if not, we will still figure out with what has been given so far, how we can still demonstrate the concepts with workarounds. But now for this particular one, for RBAC, I know Jen was able to solve it on Monday. So it's just for us to liaise with her and get it done. So unfortunately, she had been unwell, so we didn't get to meet with her yesterday. So apologies on our part on that. But today, I want us to finish SC 900 completely. And what I told your colleagues is that you should be preparing yourself to sit the first exam. So remember, you have 2 exams. It's actually been 4 weeks. Can you believe how time flies? Does it feel like it has been 4 weeks for you? So we've actually been at this for a month, and we've actually completed SC 900. So in today's session, I will address 2 platforms that we hadn't covered for data privacy and for compliance. So it's called PRIVA for data privacy and Purview for compliance, regulatory compliance. So there are specific portals for that, just the same way you had Entra for identity and access management. So you have these 2 particular solutions that you need to be aware about. They're also covered in a different training track. In fact, for most of the solutions we've covered so far, Entra is primarily for identity, and there's a certification for that. We talked about like solutions like what? Sentinel, that's covered in a separate track, SC 200. We talked about solutions like firewalls, NSGs, VPCs, that's in the AZ 500 track. So what I'm basically saying, even these solutions, it's good for you to be aware about them. And that's why they are introduced in SC 900. All of you will have SC 900, and then you branch off. to your specific specializations. You have an appreciation of all the security solutions, but maybe at varying depths of implementation, okay? So with that, it's important to note that we are now getting to the end of the SC 900 content. So like I said, we're going to look at the trust portal and privacy, and we're also going to look at Priva as the specific solution for that, and I'll give you a small run through that, and then we look at compliance in the second module. Okay, so let's start. That's what we want to accomplish in today's session. So Microsoft has what they're calling the trust portal or Priva, which basically is associated, which it pulls data from the other cloud services, and it helps you demonstrate that you have built-in data security. So its focus is on data security and compliance. And like you might know so far, this is a worldwide movement since I think the shift started in around 2016 when we had GDPR, and there's been this push for data privacy being taken as a very serious regulation across the world. And of course, in 2019, Kenya published its own legislation, the Data Privacy Act. And in fact, many countries in Africa and all over the world have enacted their own data privacy legislation. And what I invite you to do, we did this in week 1. We mentioned some of the key legislation. If you've never really gotten to an overview of what the Data Privacy Act contains or entails, I encourage you to actually do that. Just go to the internet, download it. There are also these small tutorials that cover basics of data privacy. Central components of data privacy is understanding who a data subject is, understanding the rights that the law gives to data subjects. So some basic rights, for example, will involve if anyone is collecting data about you, you need to be informed about that. And not just informed about what data they're collecting, you need to consent or agree that they can collect that data. You have other rights, like for example, at any point you should be able to request to know what data somebody is holding about you. What is your data set about me? What data do you have about me? I can also request as part of my rights to have that data to be updated. I can also ask to be forgotten or my account to be deleted. And some of the legislation protects data deletion, especially for audit purposes. But again, if it's not, maybe it's more for social media and leisurely use, there should be the ability to be forgotten, and just many other rights and responsibilities for the people who collect our data. So the ones who collect our data, the ones who process our data, the data processors and the data controllers, they have obligations to protect our data, and all these are spelled out in the legislation. So you have to show that you have security built in for data, and that's one of the things that the trust portal will do. And sorry, in fact, I was even going through this in my introduction, but they're really here. So the customer has to be in control, and I'll show the demo. The demo will be there. So the customer has to be in control of their privacy around their data. You as even a company has to be very transparent about what you're collecting, and you have to show that you have strong controls around data security. You can't, and then there are principles around security by design, for example, even just how you've set things up, they're already secure. But then also that you're complying. When we look at the solutions for privacy and compliance, we'll see that they will track your communications, for example, in your storage. Let's say if it's OneDrive, if it's the SharePoint, they will track what your data is, help you classify that data, track how data is moving through email, through chat, like let's say on Teams. Some of the features can even block sensitive data from being pushed to Teams and things like that. Yeah. So we'll be going through Priva, but but as we go through the slides, I just want to take note of a couple of things. So the dashboard you're seeing there is on privacy management, right? And you can see it's tracking how many items are associated with personal data. Okay, it's tracking items. So you can see it has said there's an increase of 189 new items as it's been tracking. And where are you exposed? So there's an element of risk management. So you need to have a visibility based on the policy, because we talked on policy, I think right from week 1, where you can have a policy defined, let's say, around PCI DSS. You can have a policy defined around a particular legislation where that particular legislation stipulates some specific requirements or controls. So you're able to build those policy definitions on Azure, and it's able to track your compliance on those policy definitions. So wherever there's a policy match and the match is non-compliant, it is flagged as a risk. Okay, so you can see on this dashboard, just from an overview, you can see you have issues because you have 652 privacy risks. Now, let's look at subject right request. So this is now where a data subject has a right to request to know what data you have. And so as part of fulfilling that request, you need to have like a workflow which can take note of that data subject and track exactly where their data has been collected and what data has been collected about them. And you can respond within, let's say, a stipulated amount of time with the data that you hold about that data subject. So you can describe to them. So what Priva does is you can do automation and workflow. You can build in some automation and tools that can help you be able to give that report to the data subject based on their requests to know what data you have of them. And it will track the time period that you have stipulated to be able to respond. And when you're overdue on those response, fulfilling those requests, then it can tell you. So in this case, you have 4 data subject requests that are overdue. Okay. Yeah. So we'll be looking at that. Then the other thing I want to introduce is in second module is another component called Purview. So Purview is a little bit more than just the data legislation compliance. It handles even more in terms of the compliance. And from Purview, you're able to also see your level of compliance and get recommendations. So it will give you a score and then help you with recommendations on how to address that. So we're going to be visiting this one as well. So you can see here, this is a dashboard of the compliance manager, which is also called Purview. And you can see that it has, so just a few things in terms of risk management. You can view your compliance posture. You can see there, you have 49% compliance, right? I hope you can see the image. You have 24 items with retention labels. So we'll be talking about data retention. And you can see it's monitoring those from SharePoint. SharePoint is like an intranet portal, and also it's monitoring this on OneDrive. And some of you may be wondering why we're mentioning SharePoint. SharePoint is integrated, and SharePoint has been there for a very long time, actually. But it's now the back-end portal integrated like with Teams. So when you're building a collaboration, and like, for example, like now, if we're in this particular team, let's say we were developers collaborating on a project, and we have set up a team on Teams. We tend to also create repositories where we are sharing data, we are chatting, we are tracking, and you can also build add-ons onto Teams, let's say based on our, what's it called, dashboards for our project workflows, right? All this communication, all this sharing of data is also tracked for compliance. So compliance is not just, let's say, I've deployed a VM and it's on the cloud, and I'm also checking whether it's compliant. What we're also being told is this compliance portal is able to integrate those features across different Microsoft platforms, including email, SharePoint, and OneDrive, okay? So, and we're going to be looking at that. So here is still Purview, giving you now a more detailed compliance dashboard. You can see it tries to simplify your compliance tracking. You have a compliance score of 69% with, Lorraine, did we go through this?
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. Okay, sawa. So you can see it has a compliance dashboard. Now, please note, there are some compliance items on this dashboard that are your responsibility. There are some which are based on Microsoft's responsibility. Again, based on the shared responsibility model that we discussed in week 1. So on this particular score, it's showing you the ones that you are responsible for. But it's also reporting at the bottom there of the ones that are Microsoft dependent, and it's not combined together with yours, though the entire total gives you like 20,000 points. The ones that you are responsible are 62, actually 6,253, and you've only implemented 57 of them. Okay, so we are tracking compliance based on some specific policies, some specific best practice and regulations, and we're going to see that. We're getting our compliance score, we're getting improvement actions over here, and in fact, you have, let's say, 496 improvement actions not implemented. 3 you've implemented since you got that, and this guide you in a very step-by-step format, and we're going to be looking at that. And it's going to track whether you've implemented controls as desired, controls not only on your data, but controls even on your services like email, but also controls on your cloud workloads and services that you've deployed. It's tracking all those and giving you that status. So we'll be looking at that. So the compliance, I think I've described it a little bit. This diagram is a bit clearer than the one that we had over here. I think it's just zoomed in better. Yeah. So you're able to track that on your actions, but also the ones that are from Microsoft. You can also see impact, the likely impact if those actions are not implemented. You can see there, like self-service password reset is one of the ones we covered under identity, right? You can also see OneDrive recommendations. You can see Exchange recommendations. Look at the one even here for lock screen. Do you know lock screen? Like when you're away from your laptop. So like if you have a device, being tracked on your platform, it's one of the registered devices. You can also be tracking whether it's been configured with an active lock screen, okay? And Defender for Endpoint usually will also report on some of these so that they can be pulled into one dashboard. So this compliance, you can see it's scoring many things. Now, DMARC is like, for example, a security protection for being able to identify spam and spoofing and protect your emails from a lot of those phishing attacks because of additional controls. Yeah. Even SPF, you can see SPF and DMARC are for email. So what I'm basically saying, this one dashboard has compiled, improvement actions across multiple services. And it's not just one-sided, right? It's giving you an overview of your environment and where issues could actually be. I think also it's saying there's some which are mandatory and some which are discretionary, right? So you'll actually see those. And the mandatory ones are where you are required to do compliance by some form of legislation, okay? So this is now us looking at the data classification, data loss prevention, records management, and governance. And we'll try and unify those into the two solutions that we've talked about. So let's understand a few concepts also in terms of the governance life cycle for data. So for you to be able to govern your data very well, you need to know your data. You need to know the data you've collected, and data can be of the, let me try and explain better so that you get a picture. If you have staff members, you have employees, you've collected a lot of data about them, right? You guys know, even in the recruitment process, even for you just applying a job, you submit quite a lot of documents, right? By the time an organization employs you and enrolls you, they already have a lot of your data. In addition, when during your employment, you're also getting even more sensitive data, like data relating to your remuneration, payroll data. You're also covered by insurance, and the organization may be tracking your health data. So just by you looking at one component that all organizations have, which is their employees, you can already see that you've been collecting a lot of sensitive data. Another category that most organizations have is customer data. So as part of your ability to deliver on some specific products and services, you collect a lot of data about your customers and your users. And that in itself is a whole different category, because it supports your sales and marketing. It supports your service delivery. It also supports your customer support, right? And you need to know what data you've collected, at what amount of detail, and where that data is also located, right? Because also you can see here, understanding your data, it's also understanding the data, where it's located, whether it's on-premise, cloud, or hybrid. Where are those repositories of very sensitive data? It could be database data, but as you all know, these days we have a lot of unstructured data, like even payroll data, employee data, customer data. You might still find some of that is not within our neatly organized databases, okay? Let me tell you also another category of data, operational data, like even those relating to your company policies. Some of those policies and documents that are shared. Financial data is another very key category that needs to be tracked. And financial data has to do with payments, but also revenue. It has to also to do with tax. In fact, right now we're doing a tax cycle. Many people who are employed are thinking of completing their tax returns. And especially when you're dealing with government, you have to do retention. So we're going to be talking later on about part of your data governance is retention. So, you've submitted your tax returns. They will still, your organization will go through an audit. As part of audit, you need to prove some details of documents that you've kept. And when government also comes for you, you need to have proven that you have some of those documents and you've retained them. You've kept them somewhere as part of the government audit. Okay, so that's knowing your data. And there's a lot more that we can talk about, but I've just highlighted maybe some of the data sets that are really crucial in any organization. Then we say, once you know your data and where it is and what type of that data is, in fact, you also need to classify that data, and we'll be looking at that in the next slides as part of governance. You need to be able to understand the sensitivity level and have a data classification label associated with that data. You now need to protect your data with good understanding of its level of sensitivity and its location. So protecting your data involves implementing many controls. Key of them include encryption, identity and access management. Access control also has a lot to do with data protection. You can also do labels. where you literally now write on the document that this is highly classified. Those markings, those labels that you apply in themselves also are part of a data protection process, okay? Yeah, and also policies that you then advise people on what to do if a data is, an element of the data is classified in that form. And then you also need to prevent data loss. Now, this one has to do with tracking behavior. And in fact, data loss prevention, DLP, data loss prevention or protection, is a class of security tools. You know, just the way you have firewalls, you have DLP, data loss prevention solutions. And what we'll be seeing is that Microsoft has also built in data loss prevention controls that track that data to prevent it from being exposed. Now, typical actions of a DLP tool will include, if I'm moving the data from, let's say, a repository or a folder, and I'm now copying it to email as an attachment, that a DLP can track that. If I'm moving that data to a USB, a DLP should track that. So part of the DLP solutions is to track, and if I'm chatting with someone, and you'll see this even in Teams, part of the DLP solution will be, it has some form of regex, like it can try and identify certain patterns. If I'm sharing a credit card number, or if I use a keyword, like when it tracks that it's something sensitive I've just shared, it can actually log that as part of the DLP solution. And in fact, you'll see in part of the notes that are highlighted, Teams can actually prevent the displaying of some of that. Yes, you've clicked send, but Teams will prevent it from being shown or displayed. So this prevents risky behavior, oversharing of sensitive information that can be very detrimental to your organization, okay? The other thing you can see as part of data governance, as part of this life cycle, is data governance. So data governance is being able to keep, delete, store, and track basically all this data in a very compliant manner, okay? So data classification is a very important part of governance and compliance. And here it's you being able to define what is the sensitive information, what is the sensitive data, and being able to label it, right? Whether it is highly classified, whether it's confidential, whether it's sensitive, whether it's for just internal use and it should not be shared out externally, and things like that. So you need to be able to identify those information types and even put labels. Then you can also pre-train the classifiers. The classifiers are the ones that look for patterns, the patterns that will match that sensitive data. A very simple way is you can know a credit card number based on its structure. You can know an ID number or a telephone number or a social security number based on the pattern, right? So the classifiers are trained to identify specific patterns so that they can be able to detect sensitive data wherever it is, in a document, in a chat message, in an email. The classifier has been trained to be able to identify that sensitive type of data. The classifiers can also be trained to track labels, and the labels can be applied by human beings. Like a document can be labeled by somebody as classified. So the classifier will then be looking for that word classified as part of the document metadata or marking to check whether that is a sensitive data. So you have the pre-trained ones, but you can also create your own custom-based classifiers. Then the other thing is that once the classifiers have been set up and also you have these solutions, they will explore the data you already have. They will basically crawl and understand and explore your data. The data, remember, is in places like email, the places like SharePoint or OneDrive that you've basically identified as your data repositories. It will explore the data Because remember, I said Teams uses SharePoint in the back end. So it will also be trying to look at the data that you have stored in those different places. I'm also making sure I have. Actually, each of these has a slide. Can I move to the slides? Because we look at sensitivity labels. We look at, yeah, anyway, let me just finish before I go to the slides. Then this element of the Content Explorer, you'll gain visibility based on an overview, summarized view on the pane. And also Activity Explorer will be checking what are people doing with that classified data across your organization. And it's able to report not just on the data that is being held, but what people are doing with in terms of the Activity Explorer. Okay, so let's look at some sensitivity labels over here. And we're going to be also looking at some demos of that. So sensitivity labels, you can see, will be applied on the data. They can be customizable. The labels can also be read, like they could be very visible to the eye that this document has been marked as confidential. And you can actually make sure that these labels cannot be changed once they have been applied on a document, okay? So that people don't go changing and reducing the level of protection on a particular data, on a particular data item, okay? What else did I want to say? I'm also looking at the detailed notes. So sensitivity labels can be used to do things like encrypt. So basically, based on the level of sensitivity, one of the actions you can apply for data protection is a decision to encrypt. So the encryption can be, let's say, on a OneDrive account, you say that at rest, when that data is at rest, it is encrypted on the OneDrive because it's of a specific sensitivity label. Something else could be data in movement, in transit. Let's say on an email, you could say that that particular data is on email, yes, but I will encrypt it because it's of a sensitive nature. We've also talked about marking. Marking can include watermarks, can include headers and footers on emails and documents, which apply that sensitivity label. You can also set those sensitivity labels to be applied automatically. So like you can enable this on Office. So admins can train or basically describe the labels that need to be applied, let's say, for specific user-generated or department-generated content to have a particular label, okay? Also, the capability to protect data can also be extended to sites and groups. It can also be extended to third-party applications and services using Microsoft's Information Protection SDK. So you can also build this into the application and into applications development. Okay. And what else do they say? Yeah. So the element of persistence is important. The label moves around with the item that has been labeled, right? That's the element also of ensuring that labels are persistent. Okay. Persistence also will require, if somebody wants to change a label, they must justify. If they want to remove, replace, edit a label, a sensitivity label, they will have to justify why, right? You can also mandate that all users must apply a label to a document that they generate. Yeah, so all these things can be configured as part of the data protection settings and enforced on the content. Okay. And you can also say certain level of sensitivity cannot be copied or forwarded on email. You can also say users of a specific group are the only ones who are allowed. So you can now apply ability to open and read content to also users and groups based on the sensitivity label. Does it make sense? I hope it makes sense. Trying to help you guys make sense of it. I already had touched on data loss prevention, DLP, and you can see this tracks your sensitivity. So based on your sensitivity labels, right? Based on what you have marked as sensitive, the DLP solution will track it over Office 365, the entire Office 365 applications, and this includes SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. It will also do this on Teams. It can also do DLP on devices. And what I want to remind you also, when we did Defender last week, there's also Defender for endpoint, like the Defender you install on your laptops when you're running Windows, right? So there is also ability, especially if that device is enrolled, right? It's part of the devices that are being managed by the organization as part of the domain. You're able to also push these protections, these DLP protections on end devices. So devices that are running Windows 10, 11, and you can see also there are features for this on Mac. Also, Defender is there for cloud apps. So you can also push data loss prevention protections on Defender cloud apps. Also on-premise, like if you have a folder or a repository being managed in the organization, it can also be tracked for data loss prevention. And you can also see for Power BI, business intelligence, which is a platform for data analytics, okay? Yeah. So what are the protective actions that DLP policy will enforce? So let's say you've enabled DLP, data loss prevention, on these particular repositories to protect labeled sensitivity items. You can, number one, show pop-ups. So pop-ups can be basically to remind people of their obligation when handling sensitive data, and it will warn them and basically tell them this particular data that you're accessing is sensitive, and it will remind them of the things that they need to take care of and do when handling that sensitive data. The second thing it could do is block. So it can basically say, you're not allowed to share, you're not allowed to copy this, you're not allowed to email this. And if there is an opportunity to override, and you can see, if you can have a look at this screen, you can see it is a blocked message. Your message was blocked because it contains sensitive data, and it explains the pattern. So it has seen that in that data, there's a social security number. There's also for health data, you can see there's some patterns matched, ICD-9 and ICD-10, that matches some sensitive data relating to health. So the action is block, but maybe depending on the user, they might request to override. And if they override, they have to describe their justification. But the other option is then to report that it doesn't contain sensitive data, so that now the admin who had configured that feature can go fine-tune it so that that data is no longer blocked. So, but you can see the blocking can come with or without an override. So this one shows you the override. Now, the third action that the DLP can do is quarantine. All right. So if it notices that there's some unwanted action, it can actually take that data and move it to a quarantine location. All right. The other thing that it can do is, so, and when it moves it to a quarantine location, it will lock it, preventing any further access to that data until the administrator reviews it. The other action I said was on Teams, DLP can prevent the data from appearing on the chat. So let's say somebody was now in the process of trying to communicate with another person, sensitive data on the chat. What Teams will do when it's being posted, like when the person clicks post, Teams can actually block and not display that sensitive data, okay? So I hope you guys are appreciating the features for protecting data. All right, let's go to the next discussion on retention. So retention is a very important feature. Sorry, I'm looking for my mouse. Yeah. So retention is another feature, and retention is the ability to retain documents so that you can also, and you're sometimes required to keep those documents for a minimum amount of time as part of regulation. Now, let me give you an example. Banks in Kenya are mandated to keep financial transaction records for 7 years, right? You might also find some situations, part of audit, that you're required to keep your audited accounts for at least 3 years, right? Cycles of, let's say, 3 years at a minimum. But you see, banks even have a stricter one for 7 years. So for you to comply, you have to have a way of saying this is the data and it has a particular retention label. A retention label then will say, this document cannot be deleted, it cannot be tampered with, it cannot be modified, and it has to be kept for this period of time. So that's the element of retaining, right? Then, of course, you might reach a place where you need to delete. And deleting is still good because deleting reduces your exposure. You no longer are holding sensitive data. So you have nothing to lose. Like even if you got hacked, at least thank God you deleted that data and it's no longer on your system. So you don't have to worry about the data that you no longer have to hold because you deleted it and it is no longer part of your exposure. Because you want to also know how exposed are you should you get hacked. The less data you have, the less you're exposed. The more data you retain, the more likely you're exposed. Do you get the argument? So retention also has an argument around deletion because yes, you retain for the mandated requirement in terms of time, but then after that, you now need to agree as an organization not to retain that old content because you're no longer required to keep it. It's no longer part of your, compliance requirements, and you don't even need it maybe in part of your operations, and it's no longer relevant. So just delete it to minimize your exposure. All right. So, so there are a couple of things relating to number one, applying a retention label. So you need to assign retention labels to different items. And so here the argument is you should only put one retention label at a time. And the retention label will travel with the document. All right. So that it's part of the document's metadata, right? You can also configure these retention labels to be applied automatically depending on the type of document and how it's associated with its department and what its function is. Then disposition is that element of deleting and getting rid of, disposing, in other words, right? Disposition is that process of getting rid of what you no longer need to retain. So you need to also be able to support the element of reviewing how disposition has been done. And then you also need to have your labeling policy, and this can also be available for people to see how you're doing it. What you can see also on that diagram, other than the labels and how they applied to different documents and based on policies, is where they are enforced. So you can see Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft 365, and when you see the groups, it's in terms of teams. So this also engages teams. So all this is there. You also can specify actions. So the actions here would be, you retain and you say the period of time, that's the action. Delete is another action. You can specify delete after a period of time, but you can also specify retain, then delete as an action. So you specify both of them at the same time. You can specify retain, and then you give it a period of time to retain, and then permanently delete that after that given point of time. So it will enforce the deletion thereafter. Okay. So you can also see retention policies can be applied at a mailbox level or a site level. It can be applied to specific locations or multiple locations, and to specific users or multiple, and items inherit the retention labels of their category or their container. All right. So a record is, so let's talk about records management. Are you guys with me? I'll need to figure out a way of engaging you guys on some of these topics. So I know they are new. I'm actually looking for my mouse. It keeps on disappearing from me. So I know some of them are new, but you also need to engage so that I know you're there. All right, so let's talk about records. So when you label a content, an item, it becomes a record, and you will need to, and records are specifically when you need to show compliance. You have a legal obligation on that marked item, okay? On that marked item that you've labeled, you need to show that you've complied to some specific stipulations, maybe retention and things like that, or data loss prevention, you're not allowing sharing and things like that. So it's important that when you label content because of its very important sensitivity to compliance, you track a couple of things. So some of the things you need to track and log is, any restrictions. You need to show that you've blocked certain activities. You need to keep a log of any activity that has been done on that document as part of proving compliance. And after the end of the period that you've disposed of it, you can also maybe show proof of disposition. All right. Yeah. So administrators are the ones that can label, that can mark labeled documents as records, because records now regulatory records now are mandated. You need to keep them as part of compliance, okay? And once that label has been put as a regulatory record, it cannot be removed, okay? And after the application by an administrator, you cannot change the retention period. The administrator is the one who defines how long that record has to be kept. And the most important thing that you need to note here is that with regulatory records, nobody, not even a global administrator, can remove that label. So marking an item as a regulatory record can have irreversible consequences, okay? So this is not done automatically. This one is done by an administrator, because once an item is marked as a regulatory record, it has to be retained, okay? So you can see a screenshot here. And you can see some of the things that an administrator is now doing. You can see the administrator is setting this up. There are options for retaining items even if users delete, you see. You can mark an item as a record. Once that is done, users are not able to edit or delete emails. Only certain users are able to change or remove that label. Then you can also mark items not just as a record, but as a regulatory record. You notice here, regulatory records are even stricter than just the records, right? And then at the end of that retention period, what do you want the system to do? So it could be deleting items automatically, but you may also unmark that so that people now review again and then delete. Okay. So this is important to note. All right. So let's see Purview. Purview is the one that will help do this, all this. So Purview is the is a platform for data governance. They call it for unified data governance. And it will be able to manage this for you even with on-premise. So you can see it's able to take on-premise, cloud, and also other software as a service applications that you integrate. You're able to see one dashboard for your data. So what it will do, it will now when it ingests, it will give you a data map, right? It will be able to give you a data map for you to get to know your data. So remember when we talked about governance, one of the important things is for you to just know what data you have, right? Then you're able to also generate a data catalog, right? As part of discovery, the data discovery process, it's able to quickly catalog for you your data items, okay? You can see data sharing is a preview feature, right? So with, let me just go through this. We've said data map is able to tell you, it's able to pull in data from different sources. And this includes databases, file storage, applications, even from third parties, on-premise, on cloud, but also from SaaS. Data catalog is able to help you do quick searches, filters, generate a glossary of your data, show you your sensitivity labels. You can even track data based on subject matter, for this, you can be able to tag your data assets with glossary terms. You can also trace the lineage of data from where it has come from on-premise, how it's moving, how it's been transformed and enriched through different processing systems, and how it's maybe consumed, let's say by Power BI. BI is for insights. So you're able to see how all this is happening, okay? Then you have estate insights. You can have data officers and legal team, data officers and security officers get an overview, a bird's eye view at a glance to see how your data is, where it is, how it's moving, right? This is now called the data estate insights, right? It gives those people who are in charge of your data officers, an overview of your data estate health, okay? Then you have data policy, okay? So you can be able to set up data policy on Purview to govern the policies that govern your data. So you can have policies relating to the data owners, the people who generate those data. You can even have policies that relate to DevOps. You can also have policies relating to users and self-service, that users can have self-service, let's say, on specific content, right? So I think they were saying here, data sharing is on preview. Here, it's the ability for you to agree on how to share data, not just within your organization, but also with your partner organizations. So you can be able to implement that. So you can see some of these features are mainly for the data owners or the data producers and the data users. And then some of these features are available for the ones who are in charge as data officers. So you guys know, like with the Data Protection Act, organizations are hiring data protection officers, right? So a data protection officer will need some tools to help them fulfill their job. So what they are also saying is that this Purview portal is there to also support the work that data officers are doing. All right. So we are also coming to the summary of it so that we can get to the demo. So you guys know that there's this whole category of security risk relating to insiders. So an insider is basically like an employee. It can also be a contractor, like a consultant that you've hired. An insider could also be a third party that you've basically allowed onto your systems, and they have valid access. So you would also want to imagine that they have a username, they have a password, they have an ability to log in. So they're an insider, they're part of your team in a sense, right? Now, there's always a risk that you have a bad apple in the bunch. You have somebody who is in your insider group of employees, of even your IT team, just, all these sensitive roles. And this person might be also having ill intention. Part of it could be maybe they're compromised. They're maybe working with external people and they've been compromised. Let's say they're also helping a competitor, or because of fraud, they are cooperating with some fraudsters or criminals. But also it could be disgruntled employees who just have a vendetta. They're just angry and annoyed. So, and they might want to just cause damage. So this issue is very real. So what happens is, with that in mind, it's always good to think of your risk not just coming from external hackers. It's important to think of your risk also coming from insiders who you've trusted and maybe having malicious intent to leak data, steal intellectual property. You see all these things, including insider trading. All these things are harm. Just give me a second. All right. Sorry about that. So, we are looking forward to having you tomorrow. We're organizing, there's a lot of organization happening. So when I see a call coming on incessantly, it could be a team member asking for something because of tomorrow. I'm not picking all calls, but yeah, so I hope you guys RSVP'd. Are you guys looking forward to coming tomorrow?
Yeah.
You are, eh? All right, so we're gonna be meeting you for lunch. We start with lunch. We start with lunch at 1 p.m. If you come, let's say at 12:30, we settle in, that's even better. And we start the program promptly at 2. So at 2 o'clock we start. We'll be at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the rooftop. You'll find the direction. So if you haven't RSVP, there'll be a problem at security saying make sure you've responded to them, to the sign-ups. The ones, I don't know even if the form is still available. It might have been closed so that we have that final list today. So anyway, looking forward to having you all. And there'll be some Microsoft dignitaries coming in from outside the country. I think I shared with you guys the news about the announcement relating to Ruto's visit to the US. Did I show you? The data center is being built, $1 billion being invested in this. You saw that? Hey, you guys are so quiet. Yeah, I'm trying to have an interesting conversation. I think we went through it. Did we go through it? Joy, I know you're in my class, but I don't know whether I went through this here. Could I have someone
No, you
please tell
didn't.
me? I didn't.
No, imagine.
Okay, so what I'll do, Lorraine, I'll push a news item. There's a news item that has gone out, I think, out of Ruto's visit in the US. So finally, they announced it. So let me show you the link. It's under the news.microsoft. It's part of the, and ADC, Microsoft ADC celebrated 5 years. It was on Tuesday. They had this big celebration. That's also why some of their people are around from let me share this. So this bag of goodies that came with Ruto, I didn't share this with you guys. Lorraine, I never mentioned this.
No.
Oh my, okay. So this came out last week as part of the goodies that Ruto was able to secure. But I was already in a conversation where this was happening. Of course, I was waiting for it to come out in the public domain, but now it is. So G42 is a United Arab Emirates organization, and they're partnering with Microsoft to set up a region in East Africa. So you guys remember when we looked at the element of zones and regions and things like that? Did we do it together with you guys? The data center setups. So they're going to set up a state-of-the-art data center. It's going to be trying to tap into Kenya's renewable sources of energy, Olkaria, and it will basically be part of a new region, Microsoft Azure region for East Africa. This is a big thing. If you guys looked at the data center maps, did we do the infrastructure maps? Please speak to me. Hello. So I think I did this with the, so if you go to, it's not in your notes. So this must have been part of just my chatting. So, but it's good to know. So we always look at all these providers based on how they've deployed their infrastructure. So, so if you can do this for Azure, you can see my screen. You can also check for AWS, and you can see their infrastructure map. I'm just picking like for the big one. Google infrastructure. Oops. What did I search? I'm just telling you guys you're in the right track, eh? So you can look at the locations. So it's an aside, but an important one. So if you look at this is the Google one. They are in 40 regions, 121 zones. So a zone is a data center. And a region has at least 3 zones, 3 data centers, right? And this is how Africa looks like. What do you notice? You can also do this on your side, right? So the closest region we have is Joburg. What Microsoft is basically saying, it has announced that there's a future region coming up in East Africa. So at least our African map is not too dead. Right? Can you see it's like really, and by the way, this is the same for nearly all of them. So that is Google, only in Joburg. Look at AWS. Where are they? Cape Town, right? And then look at Microsoft, South Africa. So they're basically announcing another one. So Nairobi is just a POP, point of presence right now. It's not a full region, not a proper data center. So what have they said? They're now going to come up with a region. And notice how dark the map is really, right? Even all these are points of presence. This is a point of presence, this is a point of presence, this is a point of presence. It's not a full region. So they have just announced. So this came with a bag of goodies that we got, right? So this cloud region will provide customers not just in Kenya, but also East Africa. Then read a little bit about this. I'll post it. Lorraine, let me give you this. You post it on the, actually, let me take a minute and do it. Oh yeah, and then I also need to announce we have our talk this evening as part of our Cyber Shujaa talks. My nini is hanging, so let me do it after the class. Eh? But let me drop this on the chat. Yeah, but anyway, just to tell you that you guys are on the right track when you're certifying. And I encourage anyone who's interested, I want to show you the pillars. They talk about 4 pillars, but I want you to read this slowly because it's a very important article. Yeah. So one of their pillars is digital safety, privacy, and security. Okay. So they will need engineers, right? So first of all, they're going to be building assistance, capacity assistance for threat intelligence, but also they will need to be able to have experts with cloud security, right? And all that. So it's important for you to have the right skills, right? Because soon they will be looking to hire for some of these roles. Yeah. So even when Microsoft says that it's doing this particular program, it's because they know these things are, they knew this. So this, do you think this was a surprise? They've been building into it, right? So even tomorrow's launch is a piece of this. It's part of this whole wider initiative, okay? Yeah, and then if you look at also the regions, Microsoft is actually moving way faster than the others. They've actually deployed many more than the other players, okay? So I got into all of this discussion because of the phone call that we are preparing for tomorrow. I was being asked a few things. But everything is under control. Everything is good. So we look forward to having you. So we were talking about the insider risk. So now, what is then the approach to handling this in terms of also being ready. So the first is, you can see there with insider risk is defining the policies. So there needs to be some insider risk management policies defined. And some of the things that need to be really thought through include how data is shared, who has access to what. So this is all around access control, right? So then there's also the element of alerts. So whenever a policy is triggered and there's a problem, there needs to be some automated alerts, right, that match those conditions that were being monitored for. Now, what is triage? Triage, and I think I don't know whether it was this class, but triage is when you need immediate assessment and you need somebody to qualify how severe something is. Let me give you an example. You're sick, you go to a hospital. Do people just let you sit on the bench? No. You're usually taken for triage so that people can know, yes, you're sitting on the bench, but we know how severe your condition is. So even though I've packed you, so triage also applies in security, where you have a team that quickly evaluates the seriousness of something. They can even prioritize it and put a tracking priority number to it, and then put it on the side or allocate it for immediate attention. So if you go to a hospital and you're sick and you go to the nurse's room, they'll take your vitals. Based on your vital readings, they'll make a decision of whether to give you medicine there and then. If you have a fever, you won't even wait. They'll give you something. If you have high blood pressure, they won't even wait. They'll give you something there and then. So that when you're waiting at the bench to see the doctor, you've already been given an assessment. You've already been given an assessment, and you can even be prioritized on the queue. You may have been number 20 on the queue, but because of your condition, you're taken to number 1. Just go see the doctor right now, okay? So that's the element of triaging. So there needs to be some reviewers who can look at these alerts that have come and gauge their severity or their seriousness, and then they decide what to be done. Some of them can be allocated immediate some of them, a ticket can be raised and then assigned for later review for investigation. So cases are created for investigation so that people look at the details, and then the investigated cases are then matched with some actions that need to be taken. So action taken in order to do what? Resolve the case. So your policies should also be careful to take into consideration risk indicators associated with insiders. Yeah. And also to note that you don't have only IT. For insider risks, it's not just a matter of IT, no. You need to involve HR, because HR needs to know, again, you know, HR is the one that does background checks. HR is the one that maintains a file about that staff member. You also will need to involve legal, because some of these things might have some legal implications, and also security, okay? All right, so e-discovery. E-discovery is, I think, the last thing. Let me see. Yes. So this is the only thing, and then we end with the demos. So e-discovery. E-discovery is the element of forensics. So the way you want to think about this is some of the features that support forensics and investigations. I also see that, sorry, I'm just checking something. Electronic discovery or e-discovery. So the definition here is electronic discovery or e-discovery is a process of identifying and delivering electronic information that can be used as evidence in legal cases. Okay, so this has an element of forensics, right? And part of e-discovery or electronic discovery is being able to understand, number one, the content, and be able to search that content for specific keywords so that you can identify the items of interest, okay? So the ability to have some keywords, the ability to get those documents and export those results, and also the permissions to be able to do that, right? So And exporting the data could be exporting it from the cloud to, let's say, a local computer, right? So there are two tiers. You can see there's electronic discovery standard and electronic discovery premium. And those basically are features that Purview enables. Like if you want to think about it as licensing, and then they will have a cost element to them, depending on which tier you're using. So with the e-discovery standard, you're able to do the search that we've talked about, the content search capability, and you can see you can handle these based on specific cases. So you have case management that you have enabled, and also you can put content on hold, on legal hold, as relates to the case. With Premium, you can do the same things that you have been able to do with Standard, but it also enables end-to-end workflow. It basically supports a lot more functionality for identifying, preserving, collecting, reviewing, analyzing, and exporting materials of interest in an investigation. Okay? You can add different people into a team, and that's the element of custodians. So the custodians are basically people you have assigned that investigative role. Maybe they could be related to legal, and you've identified those as the people of interest that need to access particular content. You can see also filtering, tagging, analytics, predictive coding models. So all these are features that are built in. Yeah. So anyway, these are subscriptions at either the standard or the premium. Yes, so that's all I needed to mention. I'm just trying to see. Then audit. I think audit is the other feature, the ability to audit. And again, Purview supports auditing. And you can do, again, two tiers. Two tiers is standard and premium. So auditing is the ability to detect and respond to events. So it basically facilitates the ability to detect and respond to security events, forensic investigations, internal investigations, but also compliance, those relating to compliance. So one thing you need to appreciate is that a lot of your activities on different services on Microsoft are logged. So logs are being captured. So now what you need to be involved in with this element of audit, because audit trails, logs are audit trails, right? It's being able to define what needs to be captured and recorded and how it will be retained so that it can support the audit. Now, these audit records or these audit trails are searchable. And you can see here, log and search for audited activities are enabled by default. And you will actually be getting thousands of audit events. The default retention is 90 days. And you can access these logs using different techniques. You can access the logs through a graphical user interface like the portal. You can also access these logs through PowerShell. So when you see commandlets, they are PowerShell elements. You can also access these logs through APIs, right? So, and the element of exporting, you can export them to a CSV file. So you can export logs to CSV files that enable analytic, even like CSV files can be shared across analytic tools. Yeah. So the other thing is with Premium, so with Premium, you have a lot more capabilities of longer retention beyond 1 year. You can also have customized retention policies. You can build dashboards for intelligent insights. And you can also see it enables higher bandwidth to access the activity APIs. The activity APIs are the ones that will enable you to access the logs. Okay? Yeah. All right. So there's usually a lag. There's a notice that is put in the notes. Please take note that there is sometimes a lag between when an event happens and when it's reflected on the activity logs. It can be as long as 30 minutes. So let's say I carry out an activity right now. It may take a while before it actually features on my log dashboard. So I think that's a downside. They even say some of the actions may take 24 hours because maybe there's a workflow before an event is detected. Yeah, so that's just the downside. Some of these logs may not be reflected immediately. All right, so let's do this maybe just simple questions so that I see whether you guys have been engaged, and then we do the demos. At least we finished in good time. We have 30 minutes for the demos. So just a quick question. Please answer so that I know where you're at. Privacy and how private data is handled are top concerns for organizations and customers. Microsoft helps organizations meet these challenges through capabilities offered through two solutions. What are these solutions? What are the solutions? Please feel free to answer. We're now talking about privacy. Yeah. Wants to answer? You're all quiet, Jameni. Hata hakuna hand that is up. The 20 of us. We can discuss. It's not a death sentence. I just want engagement. Lorraine, let someone answer. You know me, I talk to you a lot. Unless you want to point out something that I've not seen. I want to see this whole list of good people here, whether they have something to say. You guys have anything to say? We've gone through this for an hour and a half. I was hoping that there'd be some responses. Hello, are you there? Lorena, are we sure we're not alone here?
I think we
Can
are
you hear
alone.
me?
The only I think we should just be volunteering someone. Perhaps that will make them if they don't want to volunteer.
Maybe that's also how to know. You know, people also sometimes log in and go. Kelly, I like your name. Are you there, Kelly?
Yes, I am.
All right. Could you give us an answer for question 1? What your thoughts are?
The choice C, Microsoft Purview Insider Risk Management and Microsoft Purview Communication Compliance.
Okay. Insider risk management is about people being malicious and trying to, let's say, steal your intellectual property, destroy your data because they're malicious. And this is right. Is that the feature we're thinking of in terms of data privacy? Maybe we could try another answer. Have you guys been listening? You guys have even run away. You don't want to be called. Are you guys engaged? Anyone?
I'm thinking of option B.
Thank you, Tabitha. Are you heading home? This is also how we know what you guys are. I'm sure people don't even want to admit because they're in all sorts of places, right? But thank you, Tabitha. That's correct. Because when we went through the list of features, okay, so number one, which solution will River? Do you guys remember? The first section of the presentation when we were talking about data privacy, we talked of PRIVA. PRIVA is the one that talks about privacy. If you could remember that. Purview is for compliance and it involves a lot more. So that was also another hint. And PRIVA, we said, it handles, that dashboard will tell you your exposure in terms of risk management. How exposed are you in terms of your data, data privacy? And it will even give you a dashboard telling you of the data subject requests that have been raised and even the ones that have not been fulfilled. All right, let's go to number 2. This can be painful depending on how engaged people are. I don't even know how we're going to get through 4 questions. I thought by now we'd be done, but anyway, let's try. Your new colleague on the admin team, your new colleagues on the admin team are unfamiliar with the concept of shared controls in Compliance Manager. How would the concept of shared controls be explained? So if you guys remember, even on that dashboard, we said that there are some controls that are your responsibility. There are some that are Microsoft's responsibility. And there was a score. Did you remember the score that we showed? So it also depends on whether you are paying attention. So who wants to try and answer this? It's part of the shared responsibility model. But also with shared responsibility model, it shows which ones are yours and which ones are Microsoft's. Who wants to answer? It's like I've even given you an answer. But I want your participation. Daisy, kindly.
Oh, thank you. First, you'd unlock the chat.
Yeah,
Then
so
I'd
aren't you
go for
all members of the chat? Are you not able to chat?
me. I can't. From my side, I can't.
Okay, then we've enabled Q&A for that because it's a Teams security feature because you're external. So like you, I can even see in your name, it's written in brackets external, right? Some of you are written external, some of you unverified. So it's a Teams Nini, it's a Teams feature. So you can put in Q&A. If you want to put something in the Q&A, we'll see it, all of us.
Okay. So for me, I'd go for choice C, controls that both your organization and Microsoft share responsibility for implementing.
Okay, perfect. I think I also already explained that. And there was even a dashboard where we could see your completion of controls that are your responsibility and the ones that are for Microsoft, right? Wonderful. So let's try and do this too. Within the organization, some emails are confidential and should be encrypted so that only authorized users can read them. How can this requirement be implemented? So who would want to try that? There's one that we kept on hammering throughout the training. Yes, unknown user, I'm not so sure who your name is. Who is it, please? Hello? Who is it? Do you want to answer? Not so sure. All right, there's silence. Who wants to answer?
I will say B.
Excellent. Sensitivity labels. That's true. So let's discuss each of them. Content Explorer is where you just wanted to see just an overview, a snapshot of the items that are on your the items that are part of the ones that need to be secured, or your just to understand your data. All right. Records management, we talked about a record. What is a record? So a record is something that will need to be retained. It has been classified and will need to be retained. So that's when you do records management, and it's retained because of compliance reasons. Then we also talked about labels, and we spent a lot of time on the labels. And we said some of the actions that you can also attach to a label, a sensitivity label. That item is classified. In addition to it being classified, when it's in OneDrive, it must be encrypted. When it's on email, its data in transit, it must be also encrypted. So the label is also matched with the action for protecting that data based on its sensitivity. Yeah. All right. Let's read the next question. So thank you for that. So it says the compliance officer, so compliance admin for the organization, wants to explain the importance of insider risk management to the business leaders. What use case would apply? Okay. To identify and protect against risks like an employee sharing confidential information, to identify and protect against malicious software across your network, such as ransomware, to identify and protect against devices shutting down at critical moments. So which of these would you say? This one is an easy one, right?
A.
Excellent.
Option A.
Yes. So I think you've understood the element of insider risk. So let us now get into the demo, and I will stop the recording.